In today's gaming world, shooters are often praised for their immersion or cinematic experience. With games trying to get rid of as many elements that resemble a HUD as possible, with realistic ammo drops or implementing game mechanics like misfires or the jamming of a gun. Back in the early 2000s, to some, arguably the golden days of the PC shooter genre, none of these things could be found. Back then, it was all about one thing: blasting the hell out of hordes of enemies. During those days, there was a significant difference between console and PC, meaning that some of the PC releases were years ahead of its time, both graphically and mechanically. Serious Sam, when it first came out, was praised for its textures, wide open areas, and huge number of enemies that could be on the screen at one time. Though the original can be found on Steam as well, we are going to take a look today at the HD remaster labeled Serious Sam HD: The First Encounter. Its graphics overhaul is quite nice. Though the game obviously will look dated compared to today's standards, the worlds are brightly colored with some nice, albeit simple water effects, lighting and shadows, and a somewhat okay destructible environment that was probably pretty impressive back in the time. What still stands out even to this day is how many enemies you will sometimes be facing during a single battle. The premise, as earlier said, is very simple. Pick up a gun and shoot. The levels, that range from very short to fairly long on a first playthrough, are often built in a very linear fashion, with the exception that a lot of secrets can be found. These secrets can be as simple as finding an easy to miss alleyway leading to another room, to more complex or random actions like standing near a certain statue to get teleported to a different area, or secret levels all in one. The cool thing about these secrets is that they sometimes prove very useful in the form of certain weapons that you can acquire earlier than the game originally intends to. The types of weapons are pretty standard, though they all feel great to handle, and each type has variety that uses often the same type of ammo. For example, the minigun and Tommy gun use the same type of ammunition, but the minigun of course takes a while to rile up and is more powerful, while the Tommy gun can unleash punishment immediately at the cost of firing power. Some crazier weapons involve alien laser rifles or a giant cannon that shoots cannonballs which blow up and do devastating damage on impact. There's no reload button in the game, and your character runs at a quick-knack pace with strafing and dodging, making the action even more frantic. And that is what this game is all about. Though there are some sections where you need to turn a certain switch, press a button, or put certain items in place to progress to the next area, most of it comes down to get into the arena and shoot to unlock the door to the next one. It is a game concept that feels very old school, that in today's standard almost would feel lazy. Though it could be argued that in more recent titles like God of War, the game does the same thing, as one cannot progress through a certain room until all enemies are defeated, it is not as blatantly presented in the way that the door is closed and in order to open it up, you'll have to kill everyone. Something that the earlier installments of God of War did actually do. The amount of different enemies is not that high, but it does do a good job in presenting enemies of different sizes and that behave very differently. Where the suicide bomber comes running towards the player like a magnet to blow himself up while screaming hilariously, the skeletal minotaurs always run and dash in a straight pattern, making dodging a must. Other creatures have homing shots that they can fire at you from afar, or giant robot-like brainwalkers that can fire at a rapid rate but cannot maneuver as quickly. You often get to face a mixture of all these types of enemies, and it becomes really panicky really quickly. The highlight of these encounters are the often wide environments you get to be in. This gives room for plenty of movement and anticipation as you see all of the creatures heading towards you. Though these encounters are very fun, the game can become very repetitive very quickly if played alone. Where more recent ego shooters like Doom make it more engaging even for one player, here it is simply a brain-dead shooter where you get the same action 20 minutes in as you will be getting an hour later. The large bosses, of which there are some in the game, are too far in between and sometimes even mixed with very disappointing boss fights like a horde of frog-like creatures. That reminded me of disappointing boss encounters comparable to Dark Souls 2: The Rat King. As this was the first installment in the franchise, the creators must not have known that the large boss battles would be some of the players' highlights, which is why in the later released titles, they added a lot more crazy and huge boss encounters. Some of the boss encounters in the first Serious Sam are also a bit disappointing visually, like a lava monster that looks bland and unimaginative. So the interesting aspect with this game is that if one were to play this single player, I would actually not recommend this, as there are a lot better and more varied ego shooters out there. But what sets this apart is the multiplayer co-op aspect. The original already included split screen on PC, and the Steam HD version includes co-op of up to 16 players, which is absolutely nuts. Playing on a higher difficulty is a must then, and it just brings a smile to my face to play this game with friends and have these giant battles that really shine in the large open areas as mentioned before. It feels really epic to face tens of monsters on your own and seeing from your peripheral vision that your friends are waging their own battles as bullets, lasers, and body parts fly everywhere. The shooting mechanics themselves feel very good and meaty, with the enemies splattering all over the floor in a satisfying pool of gore. The corridor sections can be a bit more disorienting with friends, but the level design is varied enough to where each encounter tries to be a bit different in terms of an arena that is presented. Now this doesn't mean that the game won't get repetitive even when playing with friends. What you will be doing is the same thing over and over and over again. The story, which is very light to begin with anyway, gets stripped and you just head on over to the next checkpoint, and with just going from arena to arena and shooting, I found myself getting bored a little 2 hours in. The game itself is not that long and can be completed in 3 to 4 hours on the first playthrough, depending on the difficulty, and less than 3 hours on the second run. Lastly, the environments do a good job of feeling varied even though the game takes place in Egypt as a whole. Old temples lead into vast deserts that end in lush oases, which are linked to old villages which eventually will lead you to mighty pyramids. This game is meant for those who want to experience the old school feeling of shooters again with friends, with ammo and health being visible as pickups floating above the ground, and who don't have to worry about reloading or stamina. Be wary though, that this game presents itself more as a wave shooter, which can feel very monotonous after a while, especially if experienced alone. Playing this game with at least 2 or more is a must to really get but a whiff of what the developers intended to do. The chaotic gameplay makes for memorable moments, though even those cannot save it from feeling a bit stale after having experienced the same action time and time again. For a while, I was thinking if I should give the retro games I review on this channel a score or not. Obviously, I could not review them in the same sense as when they came out, and thus a score would not represent what the game meant back then. But I was thinking that I can put it up to today's standards, and seeing as what the game is trying to do and what kind of audience it caters to, I can say that I give Serious Sam HD The First Encounter a 7.4. If you have any requests of a particular game that you would like me to review on this channel, both old or new, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks.